All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Thursday draft edition of Spike Week. I say this every week. I need to stop saying this. Like, oh, this is a special edition, but I feel like this one kind of is. So I had to bring in one of my wide receiver brethren for this because I don't know if everybody else saw. We launched Spike Week as its kind of standalone project. I know I got my RotoGrinders green screen behind me. I wasn't able to get everything done before this show, but if you haven't had a chance to see on Twitter or checked out the new website, we are launching Spike Week as its own best ball product. So everything best ball focused will be at spikeweek.com, driven largely by like a Discord community. Pat, maybe we can even talk about it a little bit. The growth in this space has been just absolutely nuts. I've really dove in, kind of head over heels into this space the last few months, and it's been even bigger than even I ever probably could have expected. And so we decided to launch Spike Week just, this week. Last night announced it, and it's going live on August 1st. So I wanted to get that little bit of housekeeping out of the way before I got in with Pat. But Pat, thank you for joining me. Has this summer of best ball been as crazy to you as it has been for me?
Maybe not as crazy. I'm not launching my own product on it, but it has been pretty crazy. It's been a lot of fun because I think, and you've talked a bit about this, but like the evolution of best ball content and just sort of like my personal journey of playing best ball, where you're, first kind of realizing how different it is than managed fantasy leagues, that it really is a kind of a different game. And then, we're also trying to react on the fly to the way everyone else is reacting to this information. So we've learned a lot from 2020, which is really, it seems to me, the first year that there was kind of a mass appeal to best ball, to the point that there was a ton of really sharp content on it, a ton of really smart ways of thinking through structural drafting. And now we can look back at those lessons, but at the same time, we're in a different ADP environment. So we're kind of trying to figure out how much of those lessons are going to apply. I think there's a lot to take from there, but at the same time, what was working last year is not likely to work in the exact same way this year. Some of the stuff might, but I think there's opportunities to kind of iterate off of what was working last year.
That's such a good point. And I think that was where I kind of started the entire summer. Like we love so much, and this happened in like DFS, and it's certainly happened in like, sports betting with like chasing trends and all that kind of stuff, right? This team with this pitcher on the mound on a Tuesday afternoon game is 6-0 or whatever. Like we chase these results that have happened. Like I said, it happens in DFS. It happens in season-long managed league, even down to like just your home 12-team league or whatever. We chase these things because it gives us this sense of comfort. Like this worked before, right? And so I feel good when I now build that team. And I caught myself in the first few, like I like to just dive in like a draft season, like zero research. Let's just see how I kind of start reacting to these things when I dive into drafts. And I had kind of already seen some of the stuff. Like I knew how Herzig won last year. I knew some of the stuff that Leone was putting out there. And so like I started to draft like that. I'm like, oh yeah, bang, bang, bang. Give me these running backs, let's build, because it gave me this sense of comfort. Like I've seen other smart people doing this. I've seen that it worked last year. And then like this evolution starts to happen where, like you said, I start to think, and I'm like, just because that worked last year, and now you're seeing more people do it, more people are drafting, not only just like this way that Herzig won specifically with like hyper fragile builds, but just better structural drafting. People are doing this. And so it's been this crazy evolution in such a fast amount of time. I mean, like it took DFS like 5 years before you could convince somebody like that stacking was a thing. And now we're really galaxy braining each other in this, which I have loved, but it is kind of, to your point, we're trying to react on the fly. And I think that was a lot easier. I started to react better early on. And that kind of leads me into what I wanted to bring up to you before we started drafting was I've seen some backlash with the market getting more efficient as it pertains to wide receivers, right? You and I have talked on a couple different avenues that like this market is now getting efficient. Basically, people are figuring out how you should be drafting with all these wide receivers moving up and these running backs moving down. And I've seen a lot of backlash to people being like, that's stupid, or now we need to take advantage of these running backs, right? And like take Josh Jacobs in the 5th round or take David Montgomery and I feel like you've said it that I couldn't possibly agree more. So I wanted to maybe see if you would elaborate on it a little bit, that this might actually be one of the highest EV times to draft 0 RB. Like this, I know that we don't feel awesome about like some of the teams maybe that we're building right now, given the efficiency, but like 0 RB is like, we couldn't build as good of 0 RB teams like in May as we can right now because of kind of some of the things that are happening to later running backs. Is that kind of how you're feeling about the drafts that you're doing right now?
Yeah, I've been doing more 0 running back as wide receivers have moved up, which might seem counterintuitive, or it might seem like I'm like zigging even harder as the field is zigging instead of zagging. But I think what happens is like the more efficient the ADP becomes with wide receivers, then the more efficient you need to be drafting. And so, for example, with the FFPC main event, Pete Overzet and I, we kicked that off. We were in the main event that launched on July 4th. And at 111, we took Antonio Gibson, which I know you love Antonio Gibson. I love Antonio Gibson, but Diggs and Tyreek Hill were both there. And passing on those guys for Gibson is suboptimal. Like it just is. But I know that within that structure or within that ADP environment, we were able to get Kittle back on the wrap. So now we have the elite tight end. And then we were able to hammer wide receivers through basically until we actually luckily landed on Darrell Henderson as our RB2, I think in round 10. So, just hammering like 8 straight wide receivers there. We didn't go with an elite quarterback. We ended up going with Trey Lance later. So that gave us more wide receiver firepower. We were able to get, I think, Will Fuller in the 8th. We have a very strong wide receiver core despite doing something suboptimal. And what that ADP environment kind of forces you to do if you don't take the running back there at 111 is you either go extreme 0 running back where you don't take a running back probably until like round 10 or 11, or you do something I think even more suboptimal in like round 7, which is where Michael Carter went. You see these guys who really don't deserve their ADP getting pushed up because the room is so running back thirsty that I think you want to do like the 1v1, the 2v2 game of where you can draft, these running backs. If the ADP environment there was different and I knew that I could kind of sit back in round 8 and round 9 and there'd be running back values that I really liked, then I would not have passed on Diggs and Hill. I would have, if the room was more efficient, I think I would have been more efficient. And that's how I feel like things are happening right now on Underdog, where the room is not going to let me get wide receivers that I really love in round 8 and 9. I mean, I'm going to start having to reach for Elijah Moore now in round 9. I can't sit back even in round like 12 and get Rondale Moore anymore. So there's this period where, I knew I could basically make up for doing things a little bit suboptimally and still end up with a team that I really loved. Those opportunities are kind of drying up as all these wide receivers get pushed up. And so my ability to have a team that I am absolutely crushing people in the flex with wide receivers, the route to do that now is 0 running back. And there's now going to be running backs falling in ranges where I feel pretty good about taking them. I mean, there's a period in a lot of these drafts where like round like 12, 13, 14, I'm like, yeah, I could take, and I could take AJ Dillon in round 10, but I could just sit back another couple rounds. And, I think I got James Conner in the late 11th in one of these today. Yeah. And it's like, that feels pretty good when I've started, Kelsey, Ridley, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore. Like that feels pretty good when you can get like Javonte Williams in the late 6th, and then you can get, a James Conner in the late 11th, maybe throw like a Michael Carter in the 8-9 turn. It's kind of a 0 running back build that actually feels pretty comfortable because of the way the running back values are falling.
it's been a huge evolution for me. We're talking mostly underdog specifically, just so we're clear to anybody that, like Pat definitely outlined just stark differences between like FFPC and underdog. I mean, you want to talk about different games. I mean, we're not even playing. I mean, this is like rugby and water polo. Like, I mean, we're not even playing anywhere near the same game between those two sites, but, and there are some reasons for that, like tight end premium, whatever. But running back has been so interesting because we've also seen so how I was taking advantage, let's take a step back. How I was taking advantage of it is kind of, I think how you probably were a little bit too, like a lot of single elite running back and like pick your guy. Like, it doesn't matter. There's like 15 of them that you can choose from at the top. We all have our preferences. Both of us like to use Antonio Gibson as that example, but if you get the 101 or 102, like, okay, it's wheels up on CMC and Dalvin. I have Zeke teams. I have Kamara teams, whatever, all those guys, everybody has their preference. But then it was just like, okay, now it's open season on wide receivers, or it was like Kelsey and then Gibson or whatever, mixing and matching that single elite and then pairing it with all my favorite. It's basically, it's the same thing. It's the essence of zero RB, right? I'm building zero RB, but with that one anchor. And I do think previously
don't call it modified zero running back.
Yeah, I'm going to use every phrase. I'm going to use every other phrase. I think I listened to Sean and Gretch's pod, and that's what he called it, single elite or something like that.
Single elite, yeah.
So we're gonna use every term except the one that shall not be named term. But I really believe, and I wrote about this, and it's funny because I wrote about this strategy, and I hadn't done like the research that you did on your upside article with running backs, but that was basically my premise is I want that guy. Give me CMC, give me Dalvin, give me Arian Foster, give me whatever. I want that dude. I'm going to take my shot on finding him. And in the best ball format, even if I don't find him, it's not like I'm dead. If Antonio Gibson isn't CMC, I can still win my league if Antonio Gibson is decent. You know what I mean? I may not win the $1 million, but like, you're not drawing stone dead. I'm drawing stone dead if I find, James Conner from last year. But anyway, I really, really passionately felt that was by far in these best ball tournaments the best way to attack running back is zero RB, but attaching myself to that anchor, that single elite guy, and giving me the outs to CMC while still building in the essence of zero RB. Part of that was also because those guys that you just all mentioned, James Conner, that tier, like James Conner used to go in like the ninth round. Yeah. And now, like you said, now he's getting pushed way down, and maybe some of that should be true. I don't really know, but I also used to get, I have to get my Darrington Evans piece in on every single, piece of content that I do. I was drafting. I looked today because I actually did a draft this morning just to make sure I hadn't like forgotten how to draft on Underdog. And Darrington Evans is almost into the 170s in ADP. And I used to take him at like, it was like, do you want him at 18.10? Like, he was literally going undrafted. And so those guys have also gotten, he's the extreme example, but like the guys that another set of guys that we've talked about, right? Samaje Perine, Devontae Booker, all these guys, they're not getting bumped up a ton, but they're not going undrafted either,
right?
Anymore. So you do have to make it work with those guys at the end. So, Damian Williams has gotten actually a pretty hefty bump. There's all those guys that I used to just like be able to tack on whenever I wanted to drafts, and that all that has changed. The one thing that is where the value is like you said, Trey Sermon used to go in like the 6th. Sometimes Trey Sermon is there in like late 8. 9, maybe sometimes. Michael Carter falls a little bit. Raheem Mostert falls. So there's AJ Dillon is still
Chase Edmonds like 7-8. Even as Connor's fallen, Chase Edmonds has fallen.
Which is really interesting. Which is normally that's not what happens, right? Carter has kind of fallen. People are latching on to Tevin Coleman a little bit later. That makes sense. Whatever, but. There's a pretty big group of those guys. We lost Henderson, obviously, but there's a pretty big group of those guys there that like, I think if you just live right there in that range, and you're still going to win wide receiver. Like you said, I'm still winning wide receiver. I know maybe I'm not getting, maybe I'm taking Chase Claypool in the 5th instead of, DJ Moore or whatever, but like, I'm still going to win wide receiver. And I've just made up that value from, drafts that were happening a month and a half ago, because yes, I took a wide receiver around earlier, but I took my 4 running backs all around or more later than everybody was taking them before.
Yeah, exactly. The shift has been pretty dramatic, and I think you were right, and I hope you're right, because I was doing the same thing at the same time of just going the single elite running back. And within that ADP environment, I think single elite running back made a ton of sense, because you were able to come back and get these wide receiver values throughout kind of the late single digit rounds, the early double digit rounds, and not have to reach for, like a Gus Edwards is another guy. Gus Edwards, I feel like, was more like a 9th rounder, and now he's falling back into like the 11th round range. Even
Zach Moss
sometimes.
Zach Moss was the same thing.
Yeah. So if you can scoop those guys, and it does get to a point where, like, I like Elijah Moore, I like Rondale Moore, I like Bateman, but like once you get to round 11, those guys are sometimes gone. And after them, I feel like there's a bit of a tier break. And even with like a Bateman, I mean, Bateman has some real bust potential just because he might only run like 24 routes a game this year. It could be bad. Like, he's not even like a smash in the 11th. I'd much rather get him in like the 13th, but that's just not the environment anymore. So there's that period where I think the value actually does shift back to running backs, and you want to set yourself up to take advantage of that. You're not really set up to take advantage of it if you've taken 3 early running backs, because you don't even need that guy now. And whereas I'm taking AJ Dillon, and we talked about this last night on chip chasing, like, I'm taking AJ Dillon and I'm going to use his score every time it's even in the range of usable. Like, I'm getting the most out of AJ Dillon. And then if he pops, if he has a bunch of big weeks, obviously I'm going to benefit from that, and I'm going to tack that on to some really big wide receiver scores. The other thing with the single elite running back, I think regardless of the environment, is that I do feel that even back when I was doing it and the ADP was different, I just wasn't getting enough exposure to Diggs and Hill.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably the biggest issue with that strategy, is that you kind of, I think, and the other thing I wasn't doing enough was just like letting that strategy come to me. So like, there's a lot of teams where I wish I had taken like a Diggs and then tried to get Gibson in the 2nd. And if I didn't, that's okay. I can move to a 0 running back structure from there. Mm-hmm. But I think I was forcing the single elite running back structure too much. And now now I almost don't, I feel like I'm nervous when I do the single elite running back, because I don't know at that point what room I'm in. And if you're in the right type of room, I think it's still a pretty valuable structure. But if the room decides that it, is really going to go after the wide receivers, it can punish you even for making a single pivot and going with a single elite running back.
It's so true. I never felt more like uncomfortable at the beginning. I used to always feel super comfortable, because I kind of had my couple of strategies, right? It was basically like single elite or 0 RB, but like, I was never going to get shut out of what I wanted to do, really, in early drafts. And now, like, I even, we talked, it's been like 2 weeks. We talked on Chip Chasing where I was like, dude, just take Kelsey in the 1st round. Mm-hmm. Like, just take Kelsey. And I still will take Kelsey. But now, to your point, I'm getting shut out of wide receivers so bad that, like, I'm taking more Hill and Diggs in the 1st round. Or like, we even talked last night, what happens when you're at 11 or 12 and Diggs, Hill, and Kelsey are all gone? It's like, okay, now give me Devontae and Ridley or something, because I know I'm going to get shut. Like, you're just eventually going to get shut out, like you said, if you're in the wrong room. And I would rather be wrong on the wide receiver side. Like, okay, this isn't a full out wide receiver room. It's like, I can still recover from that. But you are dead. Like, I've never felt more dead than when I took, like you said, and it's worse when you do it with, like, I took Saquon or I took Zeke or I took whatever. And then there's a 2nd round wide receiver run. And now your wide receiver 1 is like, you're like, gosh, crap. Now do I take CEH and like lean into this? And then you're like, well, no, now I can't do that. And you just start panicking almost, like it becomes a really, really uncomfortable exercise. And so hopefully I should have even waited longer. I'm going to get into one of these best ball mania 2. I should have waited even longer to see, how many, 10 people we're
yeah, this is going to be one of those rooms.
We're in trouble. Yeah. That was like my hope. People are even asking on Twitter, like, oh, are you going to do Underdog or DraftKings? I'm like, I'm not freaking telling. I'm not telling you, because all you savages are going to get in here, and the first round is going to have 7 wide receivers in it.
Yeah, it's going to be brutal. Leone mentioned this on one of the UTR pods. They did a team review, and he was saying, like, if you were to just get completely locked out of running back, you'd probably still be okay. But if you get completely locked out of wide receiver, you will not be okay. You're not advancing. Yeah, it's over. Your team is dead. And so it is one of those things where, like, it's kind of a snowball effect. Like, once enough people are in here realizing that they're dead if they get locked out of receiver, it's like, how high can these ADPs really go? Because I think they can still go higher. It's definitely cooled off from where the puppy was. The puppy was the most wide receiver ADP I've ever seen. And this isn't that. This room might be that, but normally Best Ball Mania hasn't been that since the puppy ended.
Yeah.
I think some of the savages are over on drafters and stuff. But I think that what was happening to the puppy was fine. Like, I think it was like rational.
Yeah. That's this. Like, this is actually a really rare occurrence, like what Nick brings up here on DraftKings. And yeah, this is also kind of funny. This is why that's happening. This is precisely why that's happening, is everybody from, I don't know how everybody's, where they're at on drafts, but I know, you reach a certain point. And like you said last night, I've done the same thing on Underdog so many times. I've drafted against the same people, and I feel like this is probably the worst time to be drafting. So now people are moving over to another platform, DraftKings or Drafters or whatever. And I still feel like DraftKings is just a feeding frenzy. Like, everybody that's in here listening to this, you can just absolutely print money on DraftKings. I talked about it a little bit last night, that like, the ADPs on some of these wide receivers, you can single elite easily. You can sometimes, like, I'll gotta stop making fun of some of the, like Davises and such, but they like to take 2 running backs early. It's like, you can still print on DraftKings doing that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, it's the May ADPs on wide receivers over here, and they're absolutely quarterback thirsty on DraftKings. So there's a lot of. They're
really quarterback thirsty. I almost got completely locked out of quarterback on.
I have because me, I really like to push it. Like, I push the limit on stacks and quarterbacks, whatever. I've had a couple where it's like, shit, I don't even know if I'm going to have a guy starting week. I'm like, oh man, I have to draft Mac Jones, and then it gets really, really sketchy. So obviously we got a room here with Diggs goes early, Kelsey goes early. We'll see what Lemmings.
Let's see what Lemmings does. This is the real.
This is the. Damn it. So what do you normally do here in this situation? You get locked out of those guys.
I honestly think I would go Saquon typically. Even I just haven't been drafting Henry. But
no,
here I think we'd go Adams.
I was just gonna say I think we have to go Adams. Just because we feel pretty
where we are.
Yeah, we feel pretty confident about what kind of room this is. And how do you feel about Devontae in terms of, or just the Packers in general? I've like scooped some Devontae when I thought it made sense or whatever, but I was definitely not forcing him. And I feel like I'm really going to regret not taking like mid to late second round Devontae a lot more frequently than I was.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like Dalvin Cook last year, where like he had that dip to the late first and early second, and then eventually kind of came back up. And if you were just there, and I know you were on him, but that was like one of the key
Yeah.
things that you could have done all of last offseason. Like if you just happened to be scooping a lot of Devontae right there, it was huge. So I think it could end up pretty similar because Adams scores like an elite running back. At least he did last year. He's an absolute stud. He's not dead if they start Jordan Love. He's obviously not going to be as dominant as he was last year, but it seems more and more likely that Aaron Rodgers is going to play there.
Yeah, I was pretty torn on it to start the season. And I think that's why I was pretty scared of the Packers, and I think maybe that was a little bit silly. So we're about to approach, and so here comes the $1 million question, right? Do we take Gibson as our single elite, or do we take AJ Brown or DK? I think that's probably the question.
I think we take Gibson, and we're going to get the most out of his score. Because one thing Leone was pointing out that Josh Jacobs' teams advanced at a decent rate, like they were basically advancing at an average rate, and Gibson has this interesting profile where he's at worst, like obviously these guys get hurt. The offense could crater. Maybe Fitzpatrick just absolutely stinks this year. He is kind of old. But Gibson sets up to where like he should at least do what Josh Jacobs did if healthy last year. And then he has this legendary upside potential on top of that. So if you just structure it properly with Gibson, you're probably not like, you can probably make it so that he's not killing your team, even if he would kill a lot of other structures. But then if he explodes, you're obviously just going to smash. So
that's something we've talked. Like I've talked to Leone a lot about it. We talked pretty at length last night on ship chasing about it, and I do think it's something I struggle. Sometimes I'm very like upside or bust. Like I'm not, and I'm very much thinking through like how do I win this tournament, and sometimes I do lose sight of Leone, and I think Leone disagrees with me sometimes in my methodology, so he maybe takes too far of the, like we talked about Todd Gurley way too
we
too
talked
much
about Todd Gurley more than I ever thought I would again.
Yeah, I kind of forgot that he was like even even existed last year, and we spent like a half hour on him. But I do think it's really healthy for me, like when Leone does mention like, yes, we have goals, and and the reason why we're taking Gibson is sound and blah blah blah. But there is inherent value in him still being decent and using his score to set up the rest of your team, right? If you build a structurally sound team around, even like, I know the big dog was really good last year, but he wasn't the league winner. Dalvin was the league winner. Right. And like, but you could, if he just has a good year, like Gibson doesn't have to be a stone smash if you're smart about how you build your team. And sometimes I need to be reminded of that a little bit when I'm just like upside, all that, like really, really hammering that home. And there is a little bit more of a balance maybe than I think sometimes I give it credit for.
Yeah. And so I wrote this article on running back upside, how important it is. And I used best ball win rates to illustrate that. But I applied it to managed leagues because of all the things you just said. Like I didn't want to have to write an article that had an entire section called caveats where I talk about how you can properly structure a best ball team to get usable weeks and blah, blah, blah. Like
out of Todd Gurley.
Yeah. Oh, we're on the clock here. What do we got?
I like Amari. I don't know how Amari fell here in this room. I feel like we got to take Amari.
He's starting camp on the pup, which came out today.
Oh shit, I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay, how does that? It would be him or DJ Moore. Would you rather?
Let's go DJ.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go DJ. We won't get him on the way back. I don't think this is a huge deal. It says he was. I don't think this is a huge deal with Amari because they're one of the few teams that's reporting early.
Yeah.
Like if they were reporting next week, maybe he wouldn't start camp on the pup, but it's still obviously a red flag.
Well, I do feel I just take all the Cowboys guys. I feel like you're probably fairly similar in just taking all of these Cowboys dudes. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. But I have been taking CD over Amari. Like every time I take CD
me too.
over Amari. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I'll probably be scooping the Amari discount because we didn't really learn anything new. They talked about he was probably going to start the camp on the pup like 3 weeks ago. So this isn't really news. I guess there could have been a surprising good news report today that he's not going to be on the pup, but we kind of knew this was coming.
This is going to be funny that he did go. I was going to be interested. You know how the people get influenced really hard on these on these streams. I was going to be like, oh, are we going to get Amari at 4 at 4?
I was hoping that too.
But see, this isn't as bad as now I'm going to say this in these, but there's we're not going to get shut out of this tier. I know it's earlier maybe than people are used to kind of seeing this, even though I think the gamble on Gibson is going to pay off just fine here because, however you have ranked Julio, Chase, Higgins, Thielen, I think there's a tier break to me after that to the Deontay's, and like I love Ayuk obviously, but Ayuk at 4 or 5 is a little steep, and there's just some stability in those guys above him.
Agreed. Yeah, I think there's like a mini tier break, and then there's another tier break after that because then you get to like Claypool. And it's like with Claypool, it's like I used to get Claypool in the 6th pretty easily. Now
he's competing for mid to early 5.
Yeah. Which makes it a lot tougher. Where are you at on the 2 Bengals guys? Who are you taking first there? Well,
damn it. Higgins. I prefer Higgins. I'm not upset I'm certainly not upset, and I'm taking Chase, and I assume that we're good.
Yeah, that was
good with that. It has worked out fairly well for me that I was just getting so much like 5th round T Higgins at the beginning of draft season, and then he really shot up, and Chase kind of started to fall. So it was just a natural way for me to kind of hedge against both of those guys because ultimately I just want both of them. And like I kind of fell into the trap. Here's another thing I wanted to kind of ask you about is like I definitely am buying the Boyds, and I actually don't think Gallup is similar at all to Boyd because I don't think Boyd has that kind of ceiling. But I fell into the trap a little bit of like, oh, there's 3 guys in that offense. I'm driving the bus on like I want to buy good offenses with kind of uncertainty on target shares. And so I was like, oh, just give me Boyd, like Boyd's in the 7th round or whatever. And these guys are going in the 4th, 5th. And I think I fell back on that crutch a little bit, lazy crutch really early in draft season. And then I quickly kind of reverted to like, no, Chase and Thielen are like, or Chase and Higgins are like massive smash upsides. And I don't think that Boyd has that in his range of outcomes. Like even if one of those guys goes down, do you kind of think about that similarly in their situation?
I do. Yeah. I like Boyd. I've drafted Boyd. But it's more like if I get, Higgins and then I want to set up a stack, I'll get Boyd too.
Yep.
I'm not generally targeting one-off Boyd, especially because he's going around other guys that I like. And I don't feel like he has the massive upside. I mean, Higgins, like he gets downfield. He gets a bunch of intermediate targets. He gets targeted in the red zone. He almost was operating like as their tight end a little bit last year in terms of the red zone stuff. So, I mean, they don't really use a tight end. I don't expect them to. So both Chase and Higgins could have some real touchdown upside plus downfield stuff. Plus they just have more target upside. So yeah, I think those guys have the real, like this needed to be a year where you drafted them kind of upside. And I struggle to see that as much with Tyler Boyd. Yeah. And I think, and I agree with you on Gallup, because if Cooper misses like 5 games this year or something, I mean, and Gallup was awesome 2 years ago, like this could be the year you needed Gallup.
Yeah. I think I fell into that crutch a little bit where I was like, oh my God, I love Gallup. And so transitive property, I should love Boyd too, because, in theory, like not thinking nuanced enough about the situation, they're the same. Oh, I guess we are on the clock, and we have definitely hit so Hawkinson is available. Obviously all these running backs, all the elite quarterbacks. And then I don't know how you feel about, I tend to take Debo, Judy,
Debo's the
Gallup.
guy that I would be fine with Debo here and then see what comes back to us in the 6th.
I also like Debo because he keeps us open for Lance. You know, we don't have any Niners. This keeps us. This is pretty nice actually. You know, Gibson. I don't really take a lot of Washington, and that's another like, man. Maybe these things fit too. You know, when the stars really start to align on draft picks, it's like Gibson. I don't really take Fitz that much. You know, McLaurin goes in the third, and I don't take him a ton. I don't take Logan Thomas really. I don't take Curtis Samuel really. And so it's like, Gibson is my Washington, a little bit of McKissick here and there, but you know, De'Ami Brown, I guess I take De'Ami Brown as a flyer
De'Ami Brown
late, but it's like, oh God, it all lines up for Gibson. However, like in this, I really like, because it's like, I don't really like to take Rodgers, but like if Rodgers were to somehow fall and we take Devontae, you know, I literally just tweeted about my love for Sam Darnold as a pick this morning, and DJ Moore, and you can backdoor with Terrace Marshall. There's fun things you can do with the Panthers, obviously Burrow and Lance. And I also, you know, this is not, you're never allowed to say something and it come true, but a reason why I talked about why I like Darnold a lot and why I like setting up like Lance and Field stacks with like DJ Moore, when you take DJ Moore, is Darnold is such a great fit if you want to kind of punt off quarterback with Lance and Fields, because even if they don't start, the Panthers like first, like almost even like 8-week schedule is just awesome. And so like, yeah, he's Sam Darnold, but like, dude, he could score 20 points a game in those weeks. And then you get the Lance, you know, Lance comes in after the bye and just smashes.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so we're looking at the other thing about this kind of range is that, like, if Lamar and Kyler had come back, you can also backdoor stack them pretty easily. I mean, Lamar is very, very stackable because you get Andrews, depending where it goes. You can just go Lamar, Andrews, double up, and then Brown and Bateman are going afterwards. So I did a Lamar double stack today without Andrews. And it's just like
Hollywood
Hollywood and Bateman. Yeah, it's very comfortable. All right, what do we got?
So I'm just kind of surprised Dak did fall this far, but we don't have any real stacking options with him. Devontae, Judy, Boyd, Fuller. Hawkinson's there.
Hawkinson.
Okay, I'm down for Hawkinson. What's really nice about this is, like I said, we have kind of some later quarterbacks in mind, and this is something I do. I think we've even talked about this. I do maybe even a little bit too much sometimes. I really, really focus on like keeping my flexibility. It's like, okay, do I have stacks set up? You know, because it really, really sucks when and even like, I think this team is going well so far, and you build a good team and then you get to the end and it's like, all my quarterbacks got sniped because maybe they were expensive or whatever. And you're left with this team that you like. And then it has like Daniel Jones and Sterling Shepard or something as your stack, and you just feel like you lost all your win equity, you know, just like that.
Yeah, I had one where I went Michael Carter, and then I went Elijah Moore, and then I pushed it and I got sniped on Zach Wilson. And so, but I had previously taken Brian Edwards, so I just kind of like repaired that damage with Derek Carr, and that's the team where I had done the Lamar double stack. So I was just like, I don't need to. I want the Wilson to come to me instead of like reaching for a Wilson. So that's fine. But I think it's important to like I think there's some advantages to having like a Hawkinson or a DJ Moore, one of these guys where you're going to be able to get the quarterback probably around 17. Because what to do with those picks has been something I've been trying to think through. And I've been like, there's a lot of teams where I have a fair amount of wide receivers selected in like 15 plus, and I want less wide receiver selections in those range. In like, I would love to have a ton of my drafts have like 8 wide receivers or more, like through round 14, you know, and then just use the late picks for other stuff.
It's gotten worse. I talked about with those late running backs. That's where I lived, dude. Like what you just described was how I drafted forever. It's gotten a little bit tougher because I can't get Darrington Evans in the 17th. Right. I can't get those guys. And now if Sam Darnold turns out like Darrington Evans, you know, I won't be able to get him in the 16th or 17th anymore. Mo Alley Cox, like I would love to take, like even in this, like you take Hawkinson, it's like I don't really care what happens with my tight end too, because I just made a really pricey bet on Hawkinson. So Mo Alley Cox was my kind of guy, if you like OJ Howard, whatever. But I was trying, like I was actively planning to, how do I draft so I don't have to take wide receivers, like you said, in 16, 17, 18, or even 15, 16.
What do we got here?
Let's see. Oh, boy. Pittman and Mecole, and then like Waddle. Good Lord, Josh Jacobs.
I would do Javonte here. Javonte in the mid-7th.
You think so?
That feels pretty nice.
Is ETN gone? Yeah, ETN's gone. So that was the only other thing that I was gonna. That is pretty. My Lord, almost 8th round Javonte. This room is sick. You guys are sick. You guys are. Josh Jacobs he might not get drafted. Josh Jacobs is going to go. He might not get drafted. We're plummeting Josh Jacobs' ADP with this one draft when he goes. I wonder if people are in here and they know how much shit I talk on Josh Jacobs, and they're like, they don't want to be nobody wants to be the guy. Like, you don't want to be the guy that takes Josh Jacobs, even in the 8th round, even in the 8th round.
I did really enjoy mid-7th clicking over to running back, not even discussing Josh Jacobs, clicking right past him and taking a different running back. That was fun.
This is definitely, this and chip chasing are the only shows where that would occur. People would get here and they would be like, oh my God, we got to take Josh Jacobs, right? And we didn't even blink. We're like, oh, dude, Javonte looks good. Josh Jacobs 4 rounds after ADP.
Yeah. Because, and that's like, we talked about Todd Gurley forever last night, but that's sort of why I wanted to talk about it, because like my question with that stuff, and for anyone who didn't see it, the context was we were looking at these hyper fragile builds, and like a fair amount of them did have Todd Gurley, and these are teams that started, they had total just 4 running backs, took at least 1 in the first 5 rounds, and my question was like, why were these teams winning with Todd Gurley? Was it that Todd Gurley was actually contributing enough, or was he almost like irrelevant? Because then I think that informs what we do with the way we build running backs. Because if Todd Gurley was contributing enough and like meaningfully contributing to their win rates on those within those structures, then like maybe we should take Josh Jacobs there.
Yeah.
But otherwise we should take Javonte Williams and swing for the fences.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
I think Hardman's pretty nice here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty clearly Hardman for me, I think.
Yeah.
Hardman also gets you a little bit of that added little correlation that I'm not going crazy over, throughout my drafts, but it's like, if we liked Elijah and Hardman the same, I want to take Hardman because we have Chase. It's like, dude, right. If Chase is the upside play in week 17, then I really want Hardman coming back. And, like I said, I try not to overdo it, but you can really dream about some upside scenarios in those key playoff rounds when you start to think things like, what if Tyreek is hurt in that week? like that, then I really want that path to that little bit of extra correlation.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, if it's just sitting right there as a tiebreaker, I think it makes a ton of sense.
This is pretty nice. I know we had to reach like on the Debo range, but we kept ourselves really out ahead of this wide receiver room. This doesn't happen all that often with these savages that we're drafting with.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like, all this stuff that we're talking about, I'm wondering if there's like just a way to simplify it, just to say like, you need to have like X number of wide receivers by X round, and then do whatever you want with the kind of your luxury picks. But if you don't have, and I don't know, I basically am trying to get Leone to do this research, so that's because he'll do it better. But like, there's got to be a way of like, because you can't get locked out at wide receiver, and you see these teams. I was in a draft where like we're about where we are now, and a guy has just Chris Godwin, and you're dead. You can't finish up the 8th round with just Chris Godwin. Like, I don't care what structure you're using, like that's not going to work.
No.
So just like to be able to kind of keep your eye on that. Like I like this structure. We have the elite tight end. We won't have like the true elite quarterback, but I think we'll end up feeling like we have a path to that. Hopefully.
Yep. And I think that's, the rookie quarterbacks, maybe people disagree with me or you on the rookie quarterbacks, but I think they just are the ones that give you that path to the upside, whether it's like pairing two of them, or like, my having Darnold or whoever buy you time until they get there. They really help you provide a lot of flexibility. And it's not that we're not taking Josh Allen and Dak and whatever. I definitely have taken those guys, but I think it's a pretty big edge in this current ADP, landscape to be more open to embracing like these rookies, so that you don't, like, that's the quickest way to get run out of the it may not even be you took running backs, but like if you went Kelsey and Mahomes, you just, I don't even know how you take Mahomes right now, because if you take Kelsey and Mahomes, they're awesome. You're dusted at wide receiver.
Oof. What are we looking at quarterback now?
Ooh, Burrow.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Burrow, I'm gonna queue Burrow just to take a look. I want to look at running back. We're good. Wide receiver is getting pretty bad, but it is this tier. I mean, it would be Bateman or Burrow for me, I think. I don't know if you have a preference.
Let's go Bateman.
I don't want to push. I don't want to force. Like, it's Burrow fairly. It's not like we're scooping up two rounds of Burrow value.
No. I'd be happy with Burrow there, but
yeah. I think just the wide receiver, the depth at wide receiver is a little more valuable than Burrow.
Yeah, plus like we're about to blow through two more tiers at wide receiver here.
This is when we've talked a million times, like whether it's on Chip Chasing, my content, your content, tons of other really, really smart people. It's happening earlier in this draft because people are, this is the Chip Chasing sickos. But like, it's like, dude, just wait around. Like, some people may not like, I kind of don't hate this range very much, but like, wait till we get past Jacoby Myers. Yeah. Basically. Like, I really like Jacoby Myers and Terrace Marshall. After that, good luck, dude. If you need to count on these guys, you are in trouble.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they're fine because you're moving into like a premium dart throw territory. And that's, I like throwing on some premium dart throws, but if that's like your wide receiver 5, 6, sometimes it's like the guy's wide receiver 4. Like you're not in contention at that point.
And I really do think people really lose sight of that. They're like, okay, I only need these 3. I only need 3 wide receivers. I got 3 good running backs or whatever. And it's just not how the scoring, like it's just not how scoring distributions end up working for you in fantasy football. And it's hard to like even communicate that with people sometimes, I think. But they're like, well, look at my starting lineup. It's really strong. And I'm like, yeah, but you're actually still going to lose.
Yeah. Do we go Burrow here? At this point, I think it's.
Yeah, because I don't have a super strong take, and we are pretty strong at wide receiver still.
And Rager was the other guy at wide receiver.
Yeah.
We have 6.
I said we have 6, and so I do think. Where's the comment here? Chris posted that Hayden says this, and I actually think, like, I don't try to put numbers to it. I mean, also, if I don't have 4 in the first 7, I actually feel like I'm in big trouble. I really want to have 5, honestly. And sometimes I have 7. Sometimes I have 7 in the first 7 rounds. But I think, I don't want a hard and fast rule. But if we were going to make one, this is about as close to true as you can have. And not even just that there's anything around that 4 number. It's just if you do enough drafts, you're going to feel that squeeze. Like some of the examples that you said, Pat, like you said, you got Godwin, and then your wide receiver 2 is, I don't know, Jerry Jeudy, and your wide receiver 3 is Elijah, and then your wide receiver 4 is Traquan, and you're like, oh man, this gets hairy really fast.
Yeah, because you're not going to get big weeks from those guys. Maybe you get 1 or 2 over the course of the entire season, like that, and it's just not enough. What I would like is basically that kind of like rule of thumb, but like extended, to like round 13, round 14, something like that. But I think 4 by 7 does make sense. And that allows you to, that feels like, I agree with you. I mean, 4 by 7, like that seems very easy because you can take 1 running back, you can take 1 tight end, and you can take 1 quarterback and still get to 4 by 7. So, I mean, that's basically like, that allows you to do the single elite. But I think with, if you're in a room like this, it is more like 5 by 7.
Yeah.
It just, you're blowing through tiers. Like you'll see what used to like be a tier that lasted a couple rounds will be gone in a single round.
Mm-hmm.
Within that like 4th, 5th, 6th type of, like those tier breaks are just like going right after each other.
Yeah, and people lose track of that because you used to be able to look and you're like, okay, there's like 8 guys, right? There's 8 guys in this tier. I like all of them. I don't really care. I'm going to take my quarterback. I'm going to take Kyler. And then the next thing you know, like you said, those 8 guys go all 8 in a row, and you actually and you don't pick for, maybe you're closer to the end and you don't pick for 16 picks. Like now you're getting in deeper into the next tier. And then it just keeps snowballing on you. And so to your point, I think this, and we can talk about it a little more after we pick here, because I think this is a pretty interesting spot. Of course, Jacoby Myers went. Yeah. I do like Jacoby Myers. Rojo, Moss. Do we have
honestly,
to take
James Robinson is not that bad a pick.
Oh, wow. So I look past James Robinson too. He's like a Josh Jacobs. Let's take James Robinson. I have like almost 0 James Robinson, but this is 12th round James Robinson. I'm not that fucking confident in ETN.
Yeah, I have another share of James Robinson. I think I got him in the 10th. He's a double-digit round pick, I think. But hey, at 11-8, that's firmly a double-digit round.
35 picks after ADP. You thought you got good value on Josh Jacobs. We just took James Robinson at an even better value than
I think this is the counter argument to like why the ADP isn't irrational, or like kind of the backlash to like these ADPs are broken now. And it's like, okay, then beat me within this ADP, because I can sit back and get James Robinson in the 11th and I will still crush you with my wide receivers in the flex. And you are going to be taking like, Zach Moss also in the 11th, but you're not going to have the wide receivers to beat me, and you're going to be dealing with higher bust rates, and you're going to be dealing with less upside overall. So I think it's like the ADP actually like helps the wide receiver heavy teams, not hurts them.
And that was the thing that it took me a while actually to kind of wrap my head around. This is kind of gross. Do you like any of these wide receivers? John Brown, Bryan Edwards, Shepard?
So I've actually been taking more guys in this range where I have started taking more Edwards, and I have started taking more Crowder, just as the ultra gross guy who's going to play a lot. And he also gives you the Zach Wilson backdoor stack.
I like Edwards. I have taken a little bit of Crowder for that exact reason. Like it's not like I'm super bullish on Crowder, but that's also a really ambiguous receiving core, just like the Raiders are too. Other than Waller. Like as much as I love Elijah Moore, and that's the bet that I really want to make, who is to say that Jamison Crowder doesn't play the slot and still just like he's been a crusher, dude. He's been a fantasy winner for years now, and I'm not bet. I don't think that that's going to happen, but who knows? And so I have made those bets. What do you do? He
was also good with Washington. Like he's not just a product of the Gase system. Like he was good with Washington. He certainly benefited from, the slot receiver being the first read on every play. But
what do you think about Edwards? So I was going to, you're a much better like prospect guy, and a little bit I've looked into, and from watching him, like I play a lot of college football, DFS and stuff. What do you think about Edwards? I hate the Raiders and I hate drafting Raiders, but I was kind of high on Edwards.
I've not been as high on Edwards as like some of the other kind of more analytically minded guys. In terms of the prospect stuff, 4-year guy, he didn't have like there's like a breakout age debate of like which threshold to use. He has like an excellent breakout age if you use a 20% dominator rating threshold, but it's not very good if you look at the 30%. He didn't break out by that threshold until his senior season, which is a bit bearish. Overall, he was productive though over the course of his career, which is important, but he wasn't like hyper productive. Yeah. So I've just been like less interested in him as a prospect, but at the same time, I am not into John Brown. Like, and from the beat reports out of there, we're basically like, John Brown's probably closer to Zay Jones than he is to Bryan Edwards. So, And John Brown was not good last year, and he was on the Bills. Like,
yeah,
the wide receiver changing teams thing is not probably a good thing for John Brown. Like, he's one of the guys to worry most about it with. So I've started to.
You mean going from Josh Allen and the Bills to Derek Carr and the Raiders is probably not a great thing for an old, injury-riddled wide receiver.
Probably not. So I've definitely warmer to Bryan Edwards, and I think he's just a cheap second-year breakout play. I don't think he's the highest probability guy, but like neither was DJ Shark, neither was Michael Gallup, frankly. Like, so I think it's really good to have exposure to him.
Yeah, and that's a thing. I get a little stubborn sometimes on offenses, not even necessarily players, but it's like when I'm in that range, and this draft was a little bit different. But when I'm in that range, I'm like, I don't want the Raiders guy, you know. So this is tricky. Wide receivers, real gross unless you want to buy AJ Green. Running back is all the god awful.
This is gross. I mean, Kenyon Drake I'd be okay with, but
unless you like Troutman, Jonnu, or Hunter Henry. Now we're all in on the frickin' Raiders. Thanks.
Yeah.
But Drake makes sense. The other thing about this, with this team, if we want to stop at 4,
I think we're done.
I think we need to stop at 4. Even, Leone would be happy because they all have different bye weeks.
This is kind of 3 guys in the dead zone. Like James Robinson is sort of a dead zone profile. Yep. It's just that we got him at 11-8. So I don't know. I mean, James Robinson's gonna get plenty of touches this year. So it's not your typical kind of 11th round running back dart throw. So I actually think this is really, in spirit, this is a hyper fragile team.
And these are not the names that I usually have on my, but I build almost exclusively 4 and 5 running back teams. And, again, like you and I have talked about plenty, it's really fragile guys. And these are not the traditional names that I would build, but this is also not the traditional room. And we also talked about like Henderson being gone really feels like it has a lot more of an impact than I kind of even thought it would. You just remove that one flyer name. And now it's like, I was getting Latavius a lot more because he was also cheaper than Henderson and he fit some more stuff. And so we've removed that name, and now it's like these builds end up a little bit different. But I think this is how you should structure those hyper fragile teams in this year, in this ADP environment, with these contests, with the top heavy payouts, blah, blah, blah. Like, remove the names, but Gibson is your anchor, right? You're taking Gibson's score every week. You're basically counting on Javante's score every week, but he's also your upside play. And then you mix in whatever, let the value fall to you on whoever those next kind of guys that fit that structure. And it just so happened to be James Robinson and Kenyon Drake, but you can tell yourself a story on both of those guys as really big hits too.
Yeah. I mean, James Robinson could score some touchdowns and Kenyon Drake's got contingent value. So it's not like you don't have to even really dream. And I don't know that we need Kenyon Drake. I mean, the other thing I like about the structure is it's a bet on, it's a single elite running back build as well, where we're betting on a Gibson smash season. And in a Gibson smash season, like, we don't really need Kenyon Drake at all.
No, that is very true. But he does help you, like I said, it's just he's accumulating points. Kenyon Drake is getting points. Okay, now we're on the clock here. Let's see. There is, if you are interested in a tight end, there's a couple of these guys are
I usually
solid.
Wait past these guys.
Yeah.
Is there anything at wide receiver?
Demarcus Robinson in the 14th round.
I would do Eskridge. I would do Collins.
Yeah, let's do Eskridge. I actually like Eskridge. So I think he makes, only 30 picks ahead of ADP, but
only 30 picks ahead of ADP actually feels pretty good.
Yeah, that is true. We just now we're even on the James. Well, actually, we're still a few picks ahead on the James Robinson. There you go. On the James Robinson pick. What a great team! When Chris G blesses us with a great team, even amidst this wide receiver thirst, he did say, "I did think this was pretty funny." Just wait. We'll make a mistake eventually. It always happens. We are not drafting any more running backs, so we're not doing we're not going to take a handcuff.
We won't accidentally handcuff, thank God. That is the worst feeling.
Dude, that's got to be the thing. I mean, everybody makes mistakes easily when you're trying to do too many, but it has always seemed to be like, I did it. I never take the big dog, ever take the big dog. And like 3 weeks ago, I'm streaming. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do something different. I'm going to take the big dog on this one and just kind of see what happens. And then sure as shit, 17th round, there's Darrington Evans. It's like, it's like ingrained in me. I'm like, yep, Darrington in the 17th.
Well, especially now because like you're like, oh, he made it.
You're right. Exactly. And I take it, and I don't remember, Harbs or somebody is like, oh, Darrington with the big dog. That's an interesting strategy. And you're just like, shit.
Yeah, I know. And it always feels like I'm in a room with someone. Last night after the stream, I fired one up. I did it again, dude. I fired it up, forgot it started. Zeke Elliott auto draft.
And you've been driving the anti-Zeke bus, you know?
Yeah. And so it's like, but I will say I don't want like on about 10% of my portfolio, I actually would kind of enjoy if you just like auto drafted my first round pick or like randomized my first round pick. Because the exercise of building a team around a guy you didn't want is actually like pretty interesting. Like I think it opens you up to different stuff. Like you end up in sort of different ADP pockets than you're used to. I think it's a good exercise. And you obviously can accomplish that manually by doing something like you did, where you take the big dog, where you let, if a running back falls. I had one where I had Dalvin Cook and then Aaron Jones fell all the way back to the 211. And normally I'm not taking Aaron Jones if I already have a running back, but I went ahead and did that and then built a structure around that. So I do think it's important to like still be kind of mixing up what you're doing just so you don't like lose sight of some other opportunities.
I totally agree. And I want to touch on that because I think that's like, gosh, that's such a true statement. What do we think here though?
Do we have anything at quarterback or tight end, or is that?
No, I don't even think any quarterbacks have gone off the board or tight ends have gone off the board. Like even Troutman is still there. Hunter Henry, Komet.
I'd be okay with a tight end.
Can I take Hunter Henry?
Sure.
Are you cool with Henry?
Yeah, it works for me.
I'm trying to get a little more of the very early. I was taking like no Patriots tight ends, and I think that was just as a bet. I don't know how it'll work out, but I think we've been really hung up on this James White thing as a receiver for the Patriots. But it's like, if we can make a case for James White being a good pick, we sure as shit can make a case for the two tight ends that they just paid a boatload of money to and are very good. Like, could very conceivably lead the team in targets. And how many tight ends? I mean, well, we have two of them on this team now that are actually probably pretty good bets to lead their team in targets with Hawkinson and Henry. But it's like, that just doesn't really exist in modern day NFL very, very much. And I was just ignoring it. And I think that was probably a pretty big mistake early on. So I'm trying to get a little more.
Yeah. Gretch was mentioning that on the projections pod he did with Leone, that, like they both are hard to project, but that one of them will probably beat ADP in a pretty big way. And so it's something like this, getting exposure does make a lot of sense. All right, so what do we got? We
still got a few quarterback options: Fitz, Jameis, Carr, Darnold, Goff. We have Goff.
If there's any kind of wide receiver value, I think we might want to take it. There probably is not.
No. Good Lord, we're into Josh Palmer range already in the 15th, 16th round.
Yeah,
that is terrifying. Yeah, I mean this is just full-blown 18th round dart throw, basically.
The 18th round starts in the 16th round.
I'm gonna wait till. Can we take Darnold on this team?
I'll take Darnold. Yeah.
So pretty nice that we were still able to make it out with Burrow, Chase, Darnold, DJ Moore, Stacks. Didn't reach for any of that. We're still deep at wide receiver. We've got a pretty good stable of running backs. We have a potentially elite tight end. This is one of the better teams I think I've drafted in this last week or so, maybe.
Yeah, I feel really good about it. We navigated a pretty difficult room pretty well, I think, and I feel good about the Gibson pick. I think we were able to recover to have 8 wide receivers through this range, and I guess it was really what we got like 6 or 7 wide receivers in the rounds we actually feel good about.
Yep.
Which is less than ideal, but it's still we still didn't get locked out. And to sneak the Hawkinson pick in too. I mean, we deviated twice in a pretty wide receiver thirsty room.
Yeah, it doesn't usually work out like this. Certainly not on stream. So we need to count our blessings for this. I was going to double back on. I mean, what you said. I don't know that I even realized it as much before, but like even this morning, I did the same thing that you did and got auto. I entered a draft and forgot that I did, and then I get auto picked my first 2 picks, and it was I'm going to screw it up, but 2 running backs. It was like Chubb and Eckler or Aaron Jones or something like that. Get auto pick those 2 guys, and so like you said, going through the mental gymnastics of like, okay, how do I still make this a good team, even though I despise those first 2 picks and I feel like I'm in a hole, is like a really useful exercise to go through. And I feel like I did. I actually feel like I still made a really good team. And now it's like, I'm not trying to go out of my way to draft guys I don't want, frequently, but it makes you feel more comfortable. Like you said, when I took the big dog, I don't really want to take the big dog, but when I did, I still feel comfortable that I can make a good team. And it helps, I don't really like to hedge that much, but kind of as just a hedge, a natural diversifier, that having that skill it's a really hard thing. It's actually really hard to do that when you're like, oh shit, I screwed up. How do I still make this a good team?
100%. And I think it helps keep you sharp because I'll make that point as soon as we're in on the Raiders. We could just go hunt and run from.
Let's just stack up the Raiders. Yeah.
It's gross, but.
So all we need is Waller and Josh Jacobs to go down, and we have like and them to never throw to Ruggs again. Yeah. There's our story. There's our scenario. We have the entire Raiders.
Honestly, a Waller injury would
do it.
A ton of targets to everyone else. Yeah. Because Ruggs just isn't. He's not there. He can't be the alpha like that, I don't think.
No, and I bought in on Ruggs last year, and that turned out really. It felt really good for a quarter and a half.
And
I was ready to victory lap.
Insane play on the Jets.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I played him in DFS that week. I also played him in DFS week 1, and so I got like to experience like total like probably like 15 minutes of Henry Ruggs jubilation over the course of a 17-week season last year.
Yeah, well, that was the max jubilation. So
yeah, right. We really maximized. Shows how gross this wide receiver room is. Where's Chris's? Oh, you're not even up. Come on, you're flexing on us, and you don't even pick for like
Darrington Evans in 17-12. I mean, that's the silver lining of this. This
wow,
wide receiver thirst.
Man, we really screwed up. This upsets me. Could have finally got another. That's what somebody said. I gotta find the comment. Sorry, I'm screwing it up. Terrible radio, but it was every time you queue somebody up, they go before you. I'm like, dude, I wish that they only went 1 pick before me. These psychopaths are taking Darrington from me in like the 14th round now.
I will say, like, I don't almost no matter who was available where we took Drake, I can guarantee you, the 2v2 there of that wide receiver plus Evans probably be happier with. But
yeah, I think we need to take Marquez Callaway because they play the Panthers in week 17.
That's fine with me. I'll tell you who I have been taking in some of these is Cephas, just as like the world's cheapest second-year breakout.
Yeah.
Who he wasn't actually that bad last year.
Would he be the slowest? He ran like 4.8 or something.
Yeah, he's super slow. But I mean, like, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown there, who's supposed to be the slot guy, but he's a 4th-round rookie. Like, wouldn't be a shock at all if he didn't even play that much. And then it's a completely ambiguous wide receiver group. So Cephas is the second-year guy. I think again, who he wasn't bad. So
Right.
he could emerge into something. And, speed isn't necessarily what is prized in a Jared Goff offense. Goff offense, right? It's quickness, being able to get open in the short areas. So when it's gotten really gross, I've generally taken Cephas.
I don't hate that, and I should have. I think I've taken him like once, and it might have been you that mentioned it. That's what always happens to me too. It's like somebody says, like I've taken DPJ a few more times.
Yeah, I've taken
lately,
him too.
and it's like some people mention it, and you're like, oh, that does sound good, So I'm just going to take him while I'm thinking about it, because next week I'm going to be thinking about somebody else.
Well, that's the point that the point about kind of where you're starting with a guy you don't like, or you get auto drafted, and then you have to figure out from there. I do think that's so helpful, because you also have to think through things differently, like as you go on. Like, so for example, like with guys like us, we're not generally starting running back. If you get auto drafted a running back start, or just force yourself to do it to mix things up, you get to the pockets where like you would normally start to look at running back and you can't. And then so you go and you look at wide receiver or tight end or wherever, and you start to think through some players that your eyes have started to just glaze over when you see them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like our brains are so like, they just want shortcuts. Like they just want to stop having to like think about stuff. So like that eyes glaze over thing, I think can be helpful in some respects where you don't want to be targeting a lot of these guys, and letting them fall is often the right move. But you don't at the same time want to get to the point where you're just never even considering whole groups of players, because you're making mistakes at that point. So it helps you, I think, just kind of make sure there's nothing you're missing.
That is a really, really good point. And I fall into that trap even now, and I'm even cognizant of that. I screwed that up like last season. I was talking to Leone the other day, and I was like, okay, talk about I'm the king of being like, look, the shit that happened last year didn't matter, and guys, stop looking at all this data that is so small sample, blah blah blah. And I myself fell into that trap last year in drafts where like I had my guys, right? Like, and like you have hits on some of that. So that's the other problem, is like you convince yourself that you're smarter than you are, more than you do, because even when you have the misses, you still have hits, right? Like I was just smashing Deontay Johnson, and like he was an awesome pick last year. The year before that, I literally had like 55% Jameis in best ball drafts. Godwin, I drafted like 45% Godwin, and those guys absolutely smashed. So you forget, like, oh yeah, dummy, you were also taking 12th round Justice Hill. You were also taking 5th round OJ Howard. You forget those things because you think you've convinced yourself that like you were right about these guys. And I took way too steep of stands last year. And that's what, like, I think I did a good job building structurally, taking advantage of uncertainty, fragility, blah, 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 all the shit that I like to preach. But now I'm like trying to be a little more cognizant. I'm still open to taking a lot stronger stands on certain guys. At least like early, we're still only like halfway through draft season, or less than halfway through draft season for most people. And so I'm open to taking stands and then being able to adjust on the fly. Like we just saw the Henderson thing, right? Like, well, I'm just not drafting any more Henderson. So whatever percentage I have is whatever percentage I have. Like Darrington Evans, I can't ever get him even if I want him anymore. So like I'm not getting him. So I am taking some stands because it works itself out. But I think the exercise and the thinking those things through, like you said, is something I didn't do in the past and was a huge flaw. And I just got lazy. It was like 6th round. Yep. Give me this guy. Yep. 7th round. Yep. Give me this guy. Because like you said, I'm just taking that shortcut. And it's these little things that like even I didn't think about, like in May when I started drafting, that like this shit is so much tougher and more complex than we ever really give it credit for. And some of it's just like human mental blocks.
Yeah, I had so much Cortland Sutton last year because like he fit the structure that I wanted. I honestly think he would have been a smash. So I'll always have the half he played there where he looked like he was going to be great.
Right.
But I just didn't need to have that, to have such a big stand on him, because my stand was actually on the structure or on being wide receiver heavy. And the fact that he fit so many of those builds is great, but you don't want to take a stand. Leone and I have talked about this on Establish the Edge, where it's like if you have a macro advantage, you don't want to like burn that advantage on being overly player specific, where, you know, like Sutton was not my advantage last year. The advantage was understanding structure better than my opponents. And so getting overweight on Sutton is good. Being very overweight on Sutton is actually subtracting from another edge that you have.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do a better job of that too, because I've struggled. Because when you hit on one of those, it feels so good. It honestly like makes fantasy football worth playing when you absolutely crush a player. I mean, hitting on the player stuff is the best. Like that's like kind of why we're doing it. But you also like, I also want to be a little bit more cognizant of like the stands that I'm making, where I think I'm actually slowly starting to talk myself back into making a bigger stand on Antonio Gibson, where like based on, you know, like if I can take Gibson and then I can still structure it properly that I can actually survive if I'm wrong, because I think he has such a unique profile where, you know, he can still be like a Josh Jacobs or like, you know, a better version of Kenyon Drake last year if things, as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah.
But then I have the upside on top. But I don't want to inadvertently make big stands. Like I want to be, if I'm going to make a big stand, I want it to be something I'm consciously saying like, all right, I'm actually going to put more of my season on this one player specific stand, as opposed to like just kind of lazily drafting and then checking my exposures and being like, holy shit, I have 30% exposure to this guy just because he fit my builds.
That is so true. And I think that's what happens more frequently than someone saying, okay, I've thought this through. And like how I always talk about it, like in payoffs. And that's why I'm so big on it. It's a combination of risk versus payoff, right? What's the floor? What's the risk of like, what happens if this doesn't work? And then compare that to the payoff. I talked about it with Darnold a little bit this year. He's or a little bit this morning. He's super cheap. The floor, there's a floor. Teddy Bridgewater isn't any better than Sam Darnold, or even if he's a little bit better, like, okay, Teddy showed you what the floor was, and you're spending no draft, capital on him. But the payoff, I think, is actually fairly significant. So that's the kind of bet I want to make. So you're doing that. And I know Gibson is a different thing, but I actually think Gibson falls into a very similar bucket where there is a floor here that, like, obviously setting aside injury, which we always have to do in these, assuming he stays healthy, I just don't know how, like you said, as long as I'm doing everything else right, he doesn't at least not hurt me. When then the payoff is like, I win everything. Right. And so I do want to be cognizant of that's when I'm taking a stand, when I am able to locate the guy that is the appropriate bet in terms of risk versus payoff. I want to take a stand. I want to be like specifically targeting that guy to take a stand. I don't want to take a stand on a draft when I know I'm drafting wide receivers in rounds 2 through 7. And every time round 6 gets here, that's just the guy I like the most. And I click him. You know what I mean? It wasn't anything about him other than like, I like him better than the guys in that round, but that doesn't mean he's the right guy I want to be having 35 or 40% of. Maybe I do want to have that on, like I'm doing that with Trey Lance, right? Like I can structure my teams, I believe, around Trey Lance to where like, look, if this thing doesn't work out, I'm not drawing dead. And I'm willing to make that bet on, 30% of my teams having Trey Lance or whatever. That's my personal like belief, but like I don't want to do that with, I don't know, pick another guy. Honestly, I don't want to do it with Zach Wilson, and he's gonna start, right? Just because I don't think that there's quite the same risk versus payoff type of thing, and so I'm always trying to think through that. So I want to ask you now that you brought this up. We're gonna talk. I promise you guys we're gonna get to a couple of these teams because I have a lot to say about. Somebody said that this team buried us, and I think you're high as a kite. Is there a guy besides Antonio Gibson that jumps out to you that you think you want to take a stand on?
Well, I mean, the guys that I've been sort of trying to get a stand on are DJ Moore and T. Higgins, but they're, it's just like slowly getting away from me. The guy that I have been taking a stand on that's like some kind of version of this, like it's like half lazy and half thought through, is Jacoby Myers, because he's like the last guy in that range. To me, he jumps out of that group of wide receivers in a big way. He could be the team's wide receiver 1. I think he's good. And so And like I generally want another wide receiver there. But at the same time, like I don't really want this to be like my Jacoby Myers season. So, but at the other hand, if we were doing this in auction dollars, Jacoby Myers would cost like $4 or something based on, if we converted all these picks to auction dollars. So it's not actually my team's draft capital I'm devoting to him. So I'm actually struggling with I do want to back off on Jacoby Myers because it's gotten a little out of hand at times. But at the same time, I don't feel like Sutton one. I mean, that was more of like a 4th, 5th round pick. So I would say the two guys right now are Higgins and Moore, and then the third guy would probably be Kittle. I'm pretty willing to make a big bet on Kittle. It goes to your point on Lance and just betting on San Francisco in general. I do like that I'm getting a discount on the guy who's the best tight end in the league because of volume concerns, projections. Okay, I get where people are coming from, but he's awesome. He's an awesome. He also was hurt last year, so I think you're getting a little bit of that discount. Compared to where Kelsey is, right? So you can go instead of Kelsey. This is one of the reasons I've moved away a little bit from Kelsey. Is if I'm at the 103, the 104, we've talked about okay, maybe the move is to just go Kelsey. But if I can get Kittle at the 303, then I can get I can go Hill and Kittle in the 3rd. Rather than, Kelsey and sometimes Lamb in the 3rd. And Hill Kittle versus Kelsey Lamb, I don't think is really that close. Yeah. So Kittle's someone that I'm actually starting to structure what I'm doing in the 1st a little bit differently, knowing that I can get him often in the early 3rd. I mean, I think he's a value in the late 2nd. So he's probably the other guy that I'll end up having a pretty big stand on Kittle because I like the 1 elite build. He makes the 1 elite build very easy. And if Kittle goes off at an early 3rd round ADP, I mean, he could just be the guy you needed.
All right. So I'm going to piggyback that with another tight end that I never would have said this before. And I have my fair share of Kittle. I have basically never drafted Waller. So I have a lot of Kelsey and Kittle teams. The guy that has really, really grown on me for the last couple of weeks at least is Kyle Pitts. He started to fall. At DraftKings, he goes a little bit earlier. But he's there in the, I think he was in the 5th, available in the 5th in this draft we just did, which we've also started to see it falls into this perfect pocket of, okay, T Higgins is gone. And I don't want to reach on a quarterback because I know what that might do to my team, but I can get Kyle Pitts in the 5th round, right? So I could even start whether it's anchor running back or I could start 4 wide receivers and then take Kyle Pitts in the 5th round. And I feel like the only reason, we just kind of dropped him into an ADP bucket because nobody has any idea what to do with this kid. We know he's the best tight end prospect of all time, and it's not particularly close. We know the opportunity. You couldn't possibly step into a better situation in terms of opportunity. Not even just Julio's gone and let's project him for X amount of targets. This team is bad. They're bad. They have a horrible defense. I feel extremely confident in saying they're not going to be front running a bunch of teams. And as much as we love Calvin Ridley, I love Calvin Ridley. I've drafted a lot of Calvin Ridley. There's no competition. There is no other competition. And if Calvin Ridley's not being more of a deep down the field threat, who is? Kyle Pitts. But then also that leaves, when Calvin Ridley's running guys off, that leaves Kyle Pitts as the first read in the offense. I just think we have anchored ourselves to up first year tight end, and I know other smart people have talked about this, that don't write that off type of thing because this guy's a unicorn. But I think that we just happen to be I don't know, maybe he should go in the 5th, but I think it's just a bet the way the ADP has started to fall and how much opportunity that he has. I think the payoff is just crazy. I don't know even what the probability that he gets to the Kelsey tier, but I know what's going to happen if he does.
Yeah.
Like fifth round Kyle Pitts getting 150 targets and catching 100 something balls. Like, he's just going to destroy everyone, you know? And then God forbid if something happens to Kelsey, right? Kelsey's getting older. Like, he doesn't look like he's slowing down, but who knows, dude? We can't always predict when the 33-year-old guy starts to slow down. And it's just like, I feel like I was definitely lazy on it. And I think the market might even be a little bit lazy on Pitts, where it's just like, it doesn't feel comfortable because it's so unknown, but like, pick a better way to set up the greatest tight end prospect of all time. Like, he may not even play tight end. We don't even know if he's going to line up in line. They don't have any wide receivers. Maybe he's just a wide receiver, and we're taking, a superstar rookie wide receiver in the 5th round. If we frame it like that, with tight end eligibility, right? It was like Taysom when we got to use Taysom Hill on FanDuel at tight end. Now they're giving you a wide receiver that's going to have 150 targets, and you get to take him in the 5th round and put him at tight end. It's just just a lot of things have started to come together for me on Kyle Pitts, and I wasn't taking him early on, and I kind of want to make him a little bit of a pretty big bet this year as well. So I think we've established tight end as this position that we both kind of like to make on the upside bets.
Yeah, it's a very interesting take, and I think you mentioned. I can't remember if it was actually on the show or after the show, but we were talking about Pitts, like how he can get there on volume, and then he can get there on efficiency. And I do think he can get there on efficiency because of Calvin Ridley, being there to soak up so much defensive attention. Should have pretty good quarterback play. I think it's going to be a smart system. I think this is pretty similar to the system where Matt Ryan won MVP.
Yeah.
This is from the Shanahan coaching tree now. So you could have a pretty, a fairly efficient passing offense and a high volume passing offense. And he could be the wide receiver too, basically. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that you saw, I don't know how much this will translate, but because it's a different offensive coordinator, but last year you had very clear roles where Julio Jones, when healthy, was like the high ADOT guy. And then when Julio Jones was not healthy, you sometimes had Zacchaeus in that role, but you sometimes had Ridley in that role. And if they end up saying basically Ridley's going to play the role that Julio Jones used to play, then that means that Pitts is the new Ridley potentially, which would be pretty massive. My only thing with Pitts is that I wish that he was more in that Andrews Hawkinson range, because I think with Andrews, you have a guy we know is dialed in with his quarterback. We know he's one of these guys who can actually be the focal point of an NFL offense as a tight end, which is so rare. We know he can actually play pretty efficient. He's had really strong yards per route run. Low volume passing offense is a concern, but Andrews is a pretty strong bet at tight end. And then Hawkinson has a lot of the same things that we like about Pitts in terms of just the pure target volume. Bad team going to be throwing a lot. Way less target competition, might have to deal with more defensive attention, but this is his 3rd season coming up. A terrific prospect in his own right. And so it does feel like I don't have enough Pitts right now, because I can go, I can sit back and wait for Hawkinson to fall to me in the 6th.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's going to be, cold comfort if Pitts has an absolute unbelievable rookie campaign, which I completely agree is a real possibility. If Hawkinson has a nice little 14 points per game PPR type season, that's not gonna. Who cares where he was going? If you're taking that set of Pitts, so I do agree. I think Pitts is someone I probably need to step up my exposure. It feels like he's fallen a little bit from. You got the bump when Julio left, and now he's kind of settling back a little bit. This is kind of the right time to be targeting him.
Actually, I need to share because we're gonna sauce the one team, but I actually took this team this morning, which did not work out super well for me. Didn't turn out how I exactly wanted, naked Trey Lance, but I got Dalvin obviously, and then but you can also see this is kind of how I structure my teams. I even took James White just because I wanted to be able to flex that on Davis, that I do have some James White, but then a bunch of backup running backs, but I took Kyle Pitts, and the same thing. He fell to the 5th round.
That's pretty nice.
And you see, I took Higgins at 40, at the 47th pick. And so clearly there was this tier break. and then Pitts falls there to 502, and it's like, do I take elite quarterback? Do I reach on, do I take Ayuk when I've already taken 3 wide receivers, which I'm totally fine doing that. Like, I'm not saying that I'm not, but it's like he starts to fall now in this pocket where it's like, okay, it's a tier break at wide receiver. It's him versus elite quarterback versus starting the next tier of wide receiver. And so it's all kind of started to align where I'm really starting to dig Pitts' upside, just kind of how the drafts are breaking.
I like this a lot. And Ayuk's another one of those guys where I really like Ayuk. But there's this thing of like, I don't necessarily want to manage my exposure to Ayuk so much as I want to manage the cost at which I'm getting Ayuk.
Yeah.
And so like if I'm in a position where Ayuk's, coming back to the end of the 5th or the early 6th, like where he used to be, awesome. But in the early 5th, I'm often finding that, Higgins is now gone. And the easy thing is to just move up to the next wide receiver that I really like, take Ayuk. But finding other paths, I think is, that's how you you just don't keep chasing the same guys up the board. So I like that a lot. I think that's a great pivot to go Pitts there.
And I think that's kind of what has driven that. So let's talk about a couple of teams. We don't need to talk about ours. You guys got to see it. We even got the Chris G blessing. So I don't think once we got that, I don't think we need to talk about it. Okay. Somebody, it's back in the comments. I'm not going to pull it up, but somebody mentioned that this Do Me Favors team crushed us, and it's a fine hyper fragile for RB team. I don't even mind the structure. The structure I think is okay, but I'm going to talk. We'll both be able to fairly easily point out why this team is not.
Well, I tell you why everyone says they crushed us, because as soon as you see Zeke, Aaron Jones, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders, you have won Twitter for the day.
Yeah.
Twitter is going to love this team. So congratulations on your day. You're going to have your mentions are going to be very nice. But most people don't bother to scroll down and see how the wide receivers went. So let's get to those.
And so I might even, and I know you got nice value, right, on Miles Sanders, but here's the issue with taking Miles Sanders. You should have stopped with these 3 guys, and you might have been able to make this into a decent team, but you couldn't help yourself taking Miles Sanders, and you cannot use all of the, and I know that they have the same bye week, but guess what? You did that to yourself, taking Najee and Zeke early. You just have to eat that 0, in my opinion, because you're just not going to be able to recover at wide receiver. So anyway, you need to make this a three wide receiver team, because your wide receiver 3 is Marvin Jones. Your wide receiver 2 is Curtis Samuel. Your wide receiver 4 is Nelson Aguilar. You can't compete, especially in this room, because you're not. You think that you're like, when you build these teams, you think you're gaining all these points right here, but you're really not. You gain far less points with these 3 guys than you think that you do. And so that's why you only need to take 3, because you need to make up for the fact that you're not necessarily, like, you might gain some, but you're absolutely giving it back here. You're giving back all of those points right here, especially in a room like this, because these guys aren't doing shit for you. Having the volume, having the volume of the receivers can be helpful if this is really fun. Oh, that's a wrong comment. This is really funny. Do Me Favors is one of the best ball players in the world, and his track record shows it. That's totally fine. I would argue we have no idea who the best ball players in the world are. It hasn't been around long enough. And I don't know who Do Me Favors is, and don't take this personal. Like, I have bad teams too. I could pull you up teams where you would be like, oh my God, this Eric Bynford kid's a fucking idiot. But like, in this particular room, this team is probably pretty dusted, in my opinion, because you took these 4 running backs early, and you took Mahomes. And so it's like you couldn't resist the value, and you gave back every bit of value that you had on these wide receivers that you're going to give up way too many points to gain very little points at those other positions. So
I agree. And I think in this room, and you don't know the room you're in necessarily, until you're in it, but like in this room, I'm pretty afraid to go the hyper fragile. So it's like, I completely agree about Miles Sanders, but even Najee Harris in the third, which I know, like, Najee Harris in the third is absurd. And there's the whole, like, I know Herzig in every single draft, I believe his stance is that, he would take Najee Harris in the third. Like, that's just ridiculous smash value. But I think in this room, I would be nervous to do even that, because do you need Najee Harris as much as you need to not get locked out of wide receiver? Like, do you need Najee Harris more than you need Curtis Samuel not to be your wide receiver 2? Like, that's the thing. Or Marvin Jones to be your wide receiver 3. Like, even as your wide receiver, like, at what point would you feel comfortable with Curtis Samuel? Like, wide receiver 5, like wide receiver
4 maybe.
Like,
yeah. 4 is where we start to draw the line, I think. Yeah.
So you're missing 2 wide receivers then. And it's like, how do you get those other 2 wide receivers? And I think for me, it'd probably be to pass on Najee.
Right. And like, so there's somebody or a couple people in chat, taking offense to this conversation. And first of all, don't take offense. No one's saying that we have all the answers. This is our opinion on how we think that this structure lines up. And that's the really funny thing is this structure is fine. But it becomes down to 2, like, in my opinion, probably like 2 2v2s or maybe 3 2v2s. When you did this, all this capital and these 6 guys, you gave up. Like, this team, in my opinion, gave up too many points. Like, they're talking about like 0 RB zombies and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's not true. I like, go look at all my teams that most of them have an early. We talked about this at the beginning of this show that, like, we're taking early running backs. We were a lot, but I think this draft illustrated, and even like some of the people like loving this draft illustrated that, like, the market has changed. And you're gonna think that you're building this structurally sound team that worked for you in the past. If you drafted this team in May, you probably did crush it. Like, if you got Mahomes in the 5th and you got these running backs at this value, your wide receivers would have been smashes, and this is awesome. But we're not living in that world anymore. So I actually think it was like an important conversation to have, and this was a really good example of why we can't just be like, "Yep, this structure worked. Yep, I've done this before," whatever, because the environment that we're living in is not the same.
Yeah. Also, this is like kind of a weird room and a weird environment where, like, this, like, most of the time, this team would be pretty good. I think it's just that, although I still don't love the Miles Sanders pick, but but I mean, it's just like the wide receivers are just getting away from you so much faster here, and that just like really puts you in a position to where, the Najee Harris pick can seem amazing, and then all of a sudden, 4 or 5 rounds later, you'd probably rather switch that out for wide receiver if you had the ability to. So, and maybe people just disagree that Najee Harris in the third is a smash no matter what. But I tend to disagree with that. With you already have, I mean, this is why we talk about the 2.7% win rate for Zeke last year. I think this is part of the reason why he had that, because you already have Zeke, you already have Aaron Jones. And so now if you take Najee, Zeke, 15.5 PPR points from Zeke is not going to do it, because you've invested so much in him, and then you invested so much in the same position. So now you need him to be a smash for you. I think if you're trying to still take running backs, but squeeze out value, then you can probably get away with guys having a little bit more close to that middling season and surviving it.
Yeah, it's a people get triggered too easily. We didn't even draft a 0 RB team in this particular draft. We actually took 4 running backs earlier than I probably take. Like, we stopped at Kenyon Drake. That's sooner than I would start. This is a fair point, I think. Herzig doesn't 100% agree. I think Leone was kind of saying, but just in general, the market has changed, and people fall really in love with. Again, we talked about it at the top. People fall really in love with, I saw what happened last year. This worked last year, or even this. Look at this team I built in May. Look at this. We talked again about last night on chip chasing. I was like, dude, I was getting 16th round Elijah Moore back then. I was getting whatever. You're getting all Trey Lance went in the 14th, not the 10th. So you're building squads back then. If you stick to that same strategy you were using, even from May or June, the market has changed. And so that's not even taking into account last year. So we don't need to keep reiterating that. Fritz did ask about this team. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I want to say, because part of this is something I wanted to bring up earlier, which is there's so much happening with the prices now that it's almost like we get new salaries or something every few weeks for these guys. You have to really be aware of the shifting pockets of value, because I think that adds so much in terms of where you want to deviate from wide receiver, how you want to structure your teams. If you know that, let's say that wide receivers have shifted down a little bit back to where they were pre the puppy, then hyperfragile becomes a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah.
But you have to really keep tabs constantly on where these little value pockets are, where that gross tier is living within, at the wide receivers. That's got I like Paris Campbell. Okay. I like Brian Edwards. Okay. But that's kind of that tier that I mean, where it's I'll take guys from that range, but I'm not excited really about any of them.
Yeah.
It's where is that tier falling? Because it's kind of always shifting around, and knowing that type of stuff allows you to properly structure your teams.
Yep, exactly. And I agree with almost everything that Herzig that Herzig says, and I like the hyperfragile approach. I treat it a little bit differently than say someone like Herzig does, but we're not condoning any even real specific strategy. What I think is the most important thing is just understanding the market dynamics that exist at the time when you're drafting that thing. And that example that I bet you could do that if you just understood where the Paris Campbell, Traquan Smith, T.Y. Hilton, Nelson Aguilar, if you understood where that range lived, in this draft, it was the 11th round, right. But that's not normally what it is. And in May, that was the 15th round. Knowing that is going to tell you what's going on with the entire market. And so, it's just a thing, people no one has all the answers. And I think that's, some people are oh, well, Herzig is really good at this. He is really good at this, but we also don't even know that much about best ball. That's another thing I try to reiterate all the time. It's I definitely don't have all the answers. I'm trying in real time to react to all of this too, and hopefully intelligently kind of digest what's going on. This game hasn't been around. We've never even had these contests before. This is DFS year one. We're in the Stone Ages, you know what I mean? So we're all figuring this out as we go. I do want to talk about Fritz's team a little bit here, and then we can CMC. That's not even fair. Everybody makes a good CMC team. Here's my question. Oh, geez. Yeah, I guess 97th overall. You couldn't help but scratch the Chase Edmonds.
No,
Chase Edmonds itch. Are you doing something like a Chase Edmonds a lot of time as your RB2 with CMC, or are you punting it down a little bit more? How do you like to approach that?
No, I think that's good. I mean, around pick 97 is a good spot. I mean, not normally Chase Edmonds because he's not normally there, but I think I like that. I actually really like his running back build, and I think you could.
I don't know if I would take. I don't know if I would take McKissick specifically. Just because of the archetype of player. Yeah, I want a home run swing, especially because you got Chase Edmonds. Say whatever we want about Chase Edmonds, the thesis behind him is basically he has a role no matter what. Okay, it's kind of like you said with AJ Dillon. When I draft Chase Edmonds, I want to use Chase Edmonds' score. And that's what you did here, basically, is you're these are my guys. Now I took an upside swing on Latavius. Possibly an upside swing on Jamal Williams, I guess, and then take another upside swing, whoever your guy is here, because you don't need that score.
Yeah, I agree.
But this is pretty nice. Stockpiled a bunch of. See, look at the difference. This guy, I know it's a CMC team, but the difference between that hyper fragile team is with his two running backs, he's really not he's gaining on you with CMC at RB1, and then he's really not losing much, if a little, I guess. Let's just say he loses a few points at RB2, and then his RB5 is Rondale Moore. Your RB5 was Jacoby Myers. Well,
the other thing with the hyperfragile structure, and someone was the chat was very tilted about our commentary, saying like, are we calling Hurts a good donk and everything? No, we're obviously not. But the interesting thing about the hyper fragile strategy is that you're still winning with the wide receivers. Really, is that you're getting enough out of running back, but then you're still it's the best of both worlds. You're limiting the running back capital, but you're using the running back capital early, and then you're able to still beat people with enough good wide receivers, and you have volume. So you're making up a little bit for not having elite guys with volume, but you also do have some pretty darn good wide receivers on the good hyper fragiles. It's not that you're just like throwing Traquan Smith against the wall 10 times and beating people with that. You have good wide receivers on those builds. Herzig had Kelsey on his winning team as well. Like you're beating people outside of the running back position. So that's, I think, like, and again, I think we were commenting specifically to this room as well, because that hyper fragile team got locked out of wide receiver. And I think it's just a limit of any structure that, and I think it also talks, goes to what this ADP shift has meant. Like the one thing you can't do is get locked out of wide receiver, period. You just can't get locked out of wide receiver. And you
start to get locked out of too many other positions. Like they got locked out of tight end too. Like I like Noah Fant fine, but it's like you're not really gaining points at tight end. And now you're starting to lose a lot of points at wide receiver. And it just starts to create a compounding effect that's really hard to overcome.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if Chris, I know we were breaking down. Anyway, I just want to say, Fritz, this is a good team. You made a good team. I think Herbert to Keenan stack is nice. I don't know if Tua is stacked up. Yeah, Tua to Will Fuller, loaded wide receivers. Obviously, CMC makes it look really pretty. Andrews, double stack Tua with Gesicki. I would love to bash you, but tacked on Tyron Johnson at the end. Yeah, McKissick. I guess I would say I would probably not take J.D. McKissick. But we're really nitpicking.
Yeah, that's a nitpick.
We're really nitpicking 17th round J.D. McKissick. Chris brought this up. Let's. I don't want to bring up that guy's comment. This is interesting, and I did just kind of Google it while we were talking. It was like 15 minutes ago. Just to wrap up, obviously this is, who knows if this is true. If I guess I don't want to say if this is true. How would you go about possibly digesting this for drafts?
I guess the thing with Deshaun is like it's not just that he doesn't want to play for Houston. It's all this legal stuff. So you've got, is this going to happen? Which I'm somewhat skeptical of. If it does happen, what does that mean for 2021? So, I guess what it would mean is that I feel more confident in drafting Jalen Reagor, who I already kind of liked to begin with. So there's maybe another upside case for him. But I'm not going to draft Deshaun Watson. I don't know. Maybe I'm not being, risky enough to take some of that upside, but I still just have a hard time imagining him like playing 16 games or 17 games for the Eagles this year. Where are you at on that?
Oh, trying to digest it in real time is really interesting. I know some people that I follow that, are crazy in the best ball streets have been drafting Deshaun Watson some, like in the 18th round or whatever. And I thought that was too much. I will say, I want to monitor this, I guess, a little bit more. And I do want to think on it a little bit more because, the biggest issue is what you said, is that this isn't Aaron Rodgers. We're talking really serious legal issues that he's dealing with. And like, I've even listened to or read like John Proctor. He's actually a lawyer and that's been in the fantasy football space. And he's like, he put it like 40 to 50% chance that Deshaun never plays again. And he's like, I don't know about how confident, but it's a real risk that they're never even going to hear his case before the season starts, because like we just went through the pandemic, everything is really backlogged and he has a very complicated case and a high profile case. And so like, he may not even get a chance before the season starts. And so like on the other hand, that also means that this isn't going to be resolved before the season starts. And if a team wants to take a shot on him, they're free to, because all it is accusations at this point. I don't know. Like, again, we're really setting up a pretty long parlay on him. Like, you know, what we're talking about. We're also talking about an 18th round pick that, like, I think he would be pretty damn good on the Eagles. And so I don't think I have an answer. So long-winded way of saying I don't know, but I find it, if we start to get a little more nuggets where they're like, yeah, the Eagles are pursuing this really hard, I think we might at least have to address taking him in the 17th or 18th round.
That's interesting. Yeah, and my feeling with the NFL is like they just generally don't, especially like they've got all this vaccination stuff. Like, you know, like they'll make guys go away. They'll just, you know, they've got the ability to just, you know, put him on whatever the list is called and not have to deal with him this year. So, I would be still pretty nervous. Like, even if he went to the Eagles, I think we're still like basically half of the way there.
Yeah.
But
right.
I mean, for Dynasty and stuff, I've been saying, okay, so that's not even a real report, but for Dynasty, I've been saying like, hey, Deshaun Watson's going to play again. Like, he's going to play again. I think, you know, but it's more for this year. I've just not, I have a really hard time investing in him for this year.
Yep. And I think that's fair. And, but I did think it was at least interesting to bring up. We're talking about going through some of these different thought exercises. And I always find it interesting to think about, like, okay, like think about it for 10 minutes and like, you're like, okay, no, I'm never going to draft Deshaun Watson. But like thinking it through and talking it through with somebody, sometimes you end up, you're like, you know, that was actually kind of interesting. Maybe I do need to entertain that. And I don't think we've reached that point, you know, especially we did this live. No one knew. And this guy's word looks like it might be totally useless, but like, you know, in another week, if somebody else, you know, if Schefter comes out, right, and says something, now, like, you know, we've planted this in the back of our minds a little bit. So I think that's the biggest thing. This is apparently just carryover from chip chasing, that we just do long, we just do long episodes. But I think that will pretty much wrap it up. So Pat, you're back grinding all over the place this week. Is there anything specific you wanna you know, put out there for all the crazy bastards that are still listening to us at the end of this?
Well, I think given how feisty the chat was, people may enjoy that John Daigle is going to be coming on the NBC Sports Edge Good Football Show on Tuesday. We're still figuring out topics and exactly how this is going to go, but this originated because he texted me that he wanted to, quote, fight. And so we are going to be having some kind of fantasy football fight, hopefully a debate of some sort. He's a nomadic, so I'm actually worried he might be in Brooklyn for this episode. But there is going to be someone telling me I'm wrong on Tuesday on a Good Football Show. So people of this show may find that quite enjoyable to watch. So come check that out. And yeah, I've got next week, I'm hoping to get my running back targets article as a follow-up to that legendary upside article on NBC Sports Edge. So look for that. And then, yeah, ship chasing every Wednesday at 9:15.
Awesome. Yeah, it does appear that people will enjoy telling us how we're wrong. And hey, that makes for good engagement. So if those people want to come back, I really don't mind.
You're welcome to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, I'm wrong all the time. Please feel free. There's also no shortage of people out there telling me that I'm wrong. So we get used to it. If you're still hanging on here, go to spikeweek.com. Check it out soon. August 1st, we're launching full best ball community Discord. I'll have all the bells and whistles, you know, rankings, tiers, stacking charts, schedule related stuff, and all my content will be moving over there away from RotoGrinders. I think we're going to double post. We're going to, for the short term, post in both locations, but everything will be housed at Spike Week. It's gotten a ton of awesome feedback, and you guys are awesome with the early signups and everything. I'm going out of town next week, so I'm trying to manage how I'm gonna push out this early sign up stuff, and like I'm out of the country, so I don't know how that's going to go, but I'm working on it, and I'll be posting updates and sending out updates very shortly. But until then, I am Eric Weinfor. This was Pat Kerrane, and we are out of here.